And Tyson, I'm going to let you start because the first question is the easiest to ask.
Yeah, I see that. Let's see.
Yeah,
number 2 is actually really difficult, so you're going to have fun with number 2.
that's why I waited.
All right, how about this? So, does your car have a name? Have you named your car? And if you don't have a name for your car, and you were to name your car, what would you name her?
My first car was a hymn.
Oh, was it him?
And it was Bernard Edward Howard Ulysses the 357th.
Oh my goodness.
Because that was my license plate. And that's how I remembered it.
That's clever. I think my first car's name was Gilgamesh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, from the Epic of Gilgamesh. I was in college, so I was like, ooh, that's a cool name. Nobody else has that name, so I named my car Gilgamesh.
I'm glad you didn't name one of your kids that.
I know.
The car's much easier.
My wife is very grateful too.
Who has a name for their car? Jezebel, okay. Yeah. Emmylou? Like it. Who else has a name for your car? You have never named your car? What would you like to name? Anybody else?
Hey, Derek, do you name your UPS truck? Does your UPS truck have a name? No?
Not one that can be repeated in public, right? I want to ask this, are these words in the dictionary? And these are, you have to determine whether I've made up these words or these are really words in the Oxford Standard Dictionary. A. Spelled A. How many of you think it's in the dictionary? What do you think it means? That would be a Canadian dictionary, right? Actually, A is in the dictionary, and it's a jagged mass of balsamic lava. And it's Hawaiian in derivation. Yes. Rebranding. Is rebranding in the dictionary? Yes or no? How many think yes? How many think no? Actually, no. It means to change brands, but it wasn't actually in the dictionary and the Oxford Dictionary because they decided that it was a slang and not a real one. Now, you can find it in other places, but it wasn't in the Oxford Dictionary. Cacohalatheophobia. What? I'm not going to say it twice. That way you won't know. It's spelled Kakorrhaphio phobia. How many think it is in the dictionary? What do you think it is? What do you think it is? It's the fear of something. That's really good. An abnormal and persistent irrational fear of failure. You can use that in your classroom tomorrow. Yeah.
All right, which of these words were recently added to the Oxford Dictionary? We'll go with number 1. Whatevs. Whatevs. WHATEVS.
And if it were a word, it would be like the contraction of whatevers?
Yeah.
Okay. How many think it was added to the Oxford Dictionary? How many don't think it was added to the Oxford Dictionary? Actually,
it was. Yes, it's a contraction of whatever is to indicate that the speaker is disinclined to engage with or is indifferent to the matter. Whatevs. Yeah. All right. How about chillax? Chillax. CHILLAX. No hyphens. Chillax. Is it in the dictionary or is it slang? What do you think?
how many think it's in the dictionary? How many think it's just made up? Well, what is it? What is it?
It is, in fact, in the dictionary. It's a contraction, once again, to calm down or relax, to take it easy or to chill, and I do not recommend ever telling your wife to chillax.
Chillax out.
Yeah,
Got
you
it.
might end up with a black eye. All right. How about, I don't even know how to say this other one. You're from the South.
New Orleans.
New Orleans.
New Orleans.
Anybody think?
A southern contraction of you all young ones. Y'allins. How many think it's in? How many think it's made up? I noticed some of you didn't raise your hand. How many of you are from Texas? If you're from Texas, you've heard y'allins, but it's not in the dictionary.
No, not in there. Praise the Lord. All right. How about, I don't know how to say it. Promposal?
That's right.
Promposal. Promposal. A promposal. We're going to say that this is a contraction of a prom proposal, an invitation to be someone's date to school prom. What do you think? Do you think that that's a real word or just made up? Real word? 3 for real word. Oh, now some people.
All
right, a few of you. Anybody think that's just made up rubbish? All right, we've got a couple of you. In fact, it is a real word according to Oxford Dictionary. And TikTok. All right, last one. Nomophobic. All right, we've got another one of these phobia words. Nomophobic. Suffering from anxiety about not having access to a mobile phone or mobile phone services. So for those of us that went on the mission trip to Kenya, were we feeling nomophobic? Do you think that's a real word or made up? What do you think? Real word?
Made up?
In fact, it is a real word according to Oxford Dictionary.
Added to Oxford Dictionary last year. Which of these would you think is the most overrated? Celebrities, diamonds as jewelry, designer handbags, or spending $20,000 on a wedding? Which one of these do you think is overrated? We're going to take your hands on it. You can only choose one. Which one of you thinks is the most overrated? Celebrities. Okay? Diamonds as jewelry. Designer handbags. Wow. Spending $20,000 on a wedding. Nobody raised their hands. How many of you have kids?
There was a few.
Okay. That's your decision. Okay, your turn, Tyson.
All right. So this is just a straight up conversational question. What was your first paying job? Go. Dishwasher.
All right. In the
Working
fields?
In the field? Dishwasher. All right. Babysitter. Okay. Anybody else? Babysitter was your first paying job? All right, there's a few of you. All right. A surgery is your first paying job? Surgery? Oh, either you were really amazing or you didn't get a job for a long time. Sorry. Anybody else? First paying job? Yes, Richie.
Emptying 55-gallon trash cans half full of milk at the grade school.
Oh, boy.
Oh, wow.
That sounds like hard work.
Arnold, what about for you?
Delivering newspapers.
Oh.
All right.
All right. What was yours, Pastor Jim?
It was actually selling pop out of a refrigerator in our wrecking yard.
Okay. All right.
I was 8.
8. Yes. All right. Go ahead.
Do you prefer working or going to school either in person or remotely? How many of you would prefer it remotely? Zoom. How many of you prefer it in person? Oh, that's good. Next.
All right. What person have you known personally who has inspired you the most? You have to have known them personally. It can be like Abraham Lincoln, right? So, yes. Oh, good
nice.
answer. Mother's Day is coming up. All right. All right. Mom, you go ahead. Your wife.
Oh, wow.
All right.
And she's not even right there to be able to hear that and get brownie points.
Right.
I'll tell her afterwards. Yeah, I'll tell her afterwards.
Who do you know personally that's inspired you? Yes.
Inspired by a science teacher in college who said, spill stuff on the floor, janitor needs to feel needed.
That's a good line. Spill stuff on the floor. The janitor needs to feel needed. All right. Anybody else? We'll take one more. Who inspired you and why? Yes.
My math teacher.
Your math teacher.
Yeah, because he made it easy.
Oh,
that's good.
There you go.
Which of the following are you more likely to do to control stress? Not what you think you should do, which do you actually do to control stress? Exercise, eat, talk with friends, spend time in nature. How many exercise? Oh, that's good. How many eat? Those are some of the same people. I saw that. You eat first and then go exercise, right? Okay. How many of you was it talk to friends? Okay, and spend time in nature. Nice. Some of you are just stressed out totally because you did all of them. Okay.
I mean, I like to exercise in nature with friends so that I can eat. Can I get all 4 of them?
There you go.
All right. So what were or are your favorite subjects in school? Any students here? We have 1, 2, 3. All right. Any past students? All right. Favorite subject? Go, Damon. Recess. Is that a subject? Debatable, but all right, let's go. Science, okay. Yes. Math, okay. Woodshop. You know what? I guess I could have guessed that one, Richie. All right, in the back. History, all right. Almost in the back, right here. I saw your hand go up. Woodshop again. All right, we gotta get you guys together. Yes. English. I wonder why. All right. Yes, Jax. Art. Okay, all right. Art, all right. Was that yours back there too? All right. We got a bunch of artsy people over on this side. You guys are like drawn to each other. All right. Anybody else? What was that? Oh, Damon. You're a witty guy, you know. You gotta watch out for this Damon guy. He's witty. I love it. All right. Are you ready to go?
We're good. That's good for tonight.
All right. Have a good night.
We're going to start with prayer. Let's bow our heads together. Lord, we want to thank you that we can be together and talk about our relationships with each other and realize that that's a spiritual subject. So we ask for your presence here with us. We ask that we could look closely at our own relationships and how to improve them. These things we ask in Jesus' precious name. Amen. How are we doing as far as hearing? How many say that they'd like it a little louder? How many say we're okay? Well, that part I can't necessarily control, so that's just how that works. Don't expect ducks to climb. That fits perfectly with your comment. Don't expect Pastor Jim to speak so. If you look at how it works, it's like this. There's a process that goes on. The zoologist school for animals decided that they wanted to be professional in their work. They wanted to have a bachelor's of arts in locomotion. So what they did is they figured that in order to do that, everybody would have to be able to have the general subject of locomotion down. And they had to figure out how each of them would work on that. So what they would do is put the subjects together. There was running, because of course that was an important aspect of locomotion, jumping, and of course swimming, climbing, and flying. Now, what they decided is no animal will be left behind. They had to all participate and all make it work. Now, the duck did awesome at swimming and actually not so bad at flying. But when it came to climbing, he just couldn't make it. And quite honestly, he waddled more than he ran. And he wore out the pads of his feet, and that made it so he couldn't climb even worse. And then before you know it, he couldn't even carry so easily in swimming. In fact, he just got an average grade because he'd overexerted himself. The rabbit was fantastic at running and absolutely great at jumping. But when it came to swimming, he had a pretty hard time. The woodchuck was great and nobody put digging on it, but he still did okay. He was able to climb and move forward, and he was also not too bad at running. But when it came to flying, it was a horrifying experience. And the eagle, when it came to climbing, he cheated and went right up to the top. He got expelled from school. You look at the background and say none of them really did so well because they were moving outside of their area of expertise. They were outside of their comfort zone. They weren't doing what they were made to do. When we talk about how it fits, it's easy for us to look and say, look, they can't climb, they can't fly. They don't speak easily. They're nervous getting up front. Oh, look, these people are afraid to go out and drive or run. We look and say they have difficulties with such easy things as doing their taxes at the end of the year. And we make judgment calls based on what we think they should be able to do because that's what we can do. It's easy to judge ducks because they can't climb. Sometimes we go through the whole relationship experience judging people on our standard of what we are good at. And then consequently, we can also look at ourselves and say we're not good at this whole list of things and start feeling down about ourselves. When we look at how this is all put together, and we've been talking about the temperaments, God purposely created us each unique. 1 Corinthians 12 says, now if the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as He wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you, and the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, these parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And the parts that we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty. While all presentable parts need no special treatment, but God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. Now, you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is a part of it. And God has placed in the church, first of all, apostles, second, prophets, third, teachers, then miracles, then gifts of healing, of helping, of guidance, and of different kinds of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Do all work miracles? Do all have gifts of healing? Do all speak in tongues? Do all interpret? Now, eagerly desire the greater gifts. When we talk about God having gifted us all, it actually goes on to say that each one of you have received a gift, and that we should use that gift for a purpose, to serve the body. Now, that was specifically talking about spiritual gifts that were used for the church, but I think the same exact thing comes true when it talks about how God created us with our personalities. Each one to be a part of the overall body. Each one having something special to add to both the understanding of the nature of the body and looking at our decisions and our movement and supporting each other. We need the leaders that move forward, and we need those who come behind and support. We need those who are willing to question so that we can check where we're moving and the decisions we're making, and to call us into accountability, to analyze and ask those questions. We need those who are forthright and come out and be the greeters and share and connect, and we need those who are quiet and to themselves and wait for others to come to them. We need them all in the body of Christ. Yet you, Lord, are our Father. We're the clay, you're the potter. We are all the work of your hand. We're all the work of your hand. God has created each of us with differences for the purpose of carrying out the work of the body. For if we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. That means that each of us were prepared for a purpose. We were created with something in mind, with how God formed us. It's easy to think, man, I wished I were like, he's so outgoing, and I wish I could be happy like they are, always up and upbeat. But actually, each of us have a part to play and have a benefit of the temperament we've been given. 1 Peter 4, 10, 11 says, each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To him be glory and power forever and ever. Amen. The basis then of this is the scriptural basis that we were created with a specific purpose. We're created to carry out a calling that God has given us. That means that we can look then at how do we fit together as a whole body? How does it work when we're so different? How can we come together and still be in harmony? The temperaments tell us that we handle life differently. So we don't expect others to be just like me in how we deal with things. I look at that picture and realize that each of the areas of the temperament have different ways of dealing with issues that come to their life. If you're talking about interactions, some are energized by people, and some not so much. Some are terrorized by the aspect of just coming into a group, and some thrive on that connection. And when it comes to the responses of different things in our life, like grief, you can watch each of the temperaments and realize they're going to respond differently based even on their temperament. Not just even the relationship that they have, but based on who they are. So with that, I can't expect somebody else to respond to grief in the same way that I do. So when the choleric is faced with grief, he often will remain stoic, not tearful, being there to be the leader and the rock to be leaned upon. And so often people think, oh, he must have not had an attachment, or she must have not had an attachment because they seem to not care. It's not that they don't care, it's that this is how they process their grief. And a sanguine may fall apart on the moment and may fall apart multiple times as multiple aspects go through, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean that it's fake. If they break down multiple times, or if somebody else is crying, they start crying, it's not because they're trying to empathize with them, it comes naturally as part of their response. The melancholy may brood and may go through that cycle in depression and discouragement as just a part of how they handle the loss. And you can't expect that because the sanguine was over it when they left that day, that the melancholy should be over it as well. There isn't a necessary time length for that to take place because you see, each of us deal with it based on our personality and temperament. And the phlegmatic, it may seem like it's a quiet, slow process of letting go, and aren't each of those okay? Again, when we recognize that we don't handle all of life the same, we start looking at specific situations and give people grace to handle it in their way based on their temperament. The temperaments tell us our interactions are affected by our temperaments. So how we deal with each other is not just the person that they are, but even the temperaments. If you have two doers, and we do this process often for marriage counseling and pre-marriage counseling, we go through and help them look at their temperaments and give them some ideas of what their expectations are going to be with the temperaments they have. If I have two people who are 90% choleric, and a small amount to each of them, a small amount of phlegmatic, I can tell them that they're going to have an interesting time getting together. There will be areas where there's disagreement. There will be conflict. There will be decisions on which direction they're going to go. But here's the point. It doesn't mean that they can't be together. It only means that they have to handle it in a different way. For those doers, and this is the point, and it doesn't just carry through with marriage, it carries through in all kinds of relationships. I find that the best way to help handle that is to define the roles. In what area am I leading, and in what area are you leading? By doing that, and even in relationships, by defining our direction and what we're doing, it helps to not form false expectations. And ability to be able to say, you know, we agreed that I'm leading out in this part, right? So you can go ahead and stay in your lane. In that process, then they're able to work it through. But if both are just vying for it and we haven't agreed on those expectations, it can become a power struggle. And those aren't good processes to follow, especially if both parties are choleric. When I'm looking at those who come together, the partiers, and that's the sanguine temperament that come together, I can tell you, you will have a joyous, happy life. You may not get anything done, but it will be really fun. You may not have a good budget. You may not have any money at all because you both have spent it and nobody's controlling the checkbook. You have a great party, and the best way to do it is to plan discipline, to look and say, how do we get together? Since we're both spur of the moment, spontaneous, and happy to do that, what are we going to do when we have already spent our month's budget in the first 3 weeks? How are we going to deal with that? And the thing is to define a plan for discipline and saying, okay, let's go, but we're only going to stay out for 2 hours instead of 7 hours like we did last time. We're going to go and we're only going to spend half of our paycheck this time instead of everything like we did when we went to the casino last time. So again, looking at those temperaments and how they get together to plan for discipline. In looking at the creators, we had some folks that were having struggles and looking through how to work with those struggles because they both loved the depth that each other, and they both felt like they could relate. The problem is that they were absolutely fine as long as one of them was up. But when both of them were down at the same time, they went way down. So with those being primary temperaments, then what happens is it's good to have a plan when we're both down. What is the plan on how we're going to handle life when we're both on the downside? And that just working that out gives a good opportunity in relationships. The menders, they have a great time together, reading, watching TV, letting life go by in the hammock. They have a great time together. Where they need to plan is maybe like, okay, we need some motivation here. Let's spend at least an hour today doing something other than our job. Okay, I take doing the dishes and you have to do the laundry. That's what we'll do today. Once we get those two things done, we're chill. We're chillax. In looking at how it works with temperaments working across from each other, you can find that there's sometimes assumptions that are made. The choleric working with the phlegmatic just has a different way of thinking of life. This cartoon kind of expressed it to me. Where do you work out? The response, at the library. Different perspectives on life and how things are going. Looking at doers and creators, the cholerics come in and there's their wife on the couch, and the response, or vice versa, and the response is, get up, you lazy bum. I can't, I don't feel well. The whole process of those expectations. Now, if they were two phlegmatics or two choleric, they wouldn't have the same issues. So sometimes it's a matter of our expectations of each other. When we look at how those might fit, my dad was choleric. That was his first temperament. His second temperament was choleric. He was a driven man, and he would go for things, and he came home, and my mother was a prankster, a little joker. She liked to do all kinds of fun little things on the side and just things to have fun. And my dad was there making a plan for what they were going to do. And she made a joke in the midst of his planning. And he asked her, don't you have a serious bone in your body? And her response was, no, I think they're all funny bones. So sometimes our expectations are different, and we expect somebody to, we're planning something here, be serious. But really, is it that we're the ones who have to change, or do we have to adapt to the whole situation? Sometimes it's just that we don't understand another temperament. my oldest daughter, Shalina, if I could share with you a person who is the epitome of upbeat, positive, sunshine, that's the person. She wakes up in the morning just, hi world, I'm so glad to have you here. And her whole day functions like that. In Academy, she went on a mission trip, and what happened was a bunch of the girls said, she is so fake. She's so fake because she's always like, I'm so happy, I'm so happy. Nobody can be happy like that all the time. This story was told to me by the dean. Said some of the girls had come up and talked to me about that before we went on the trip. Said, how are we going to deal with this girl? My daughter, being the sanguine that she is, went out and began to snorkel. And snorkeled out there for 5 hours and burnt the back of her legs with third-degree burns. So this was on the first weekend of the trip, and literally there were no ability to go any place to get anything done. So what happened is, for the entire trip, she had to stay inside and clean up and take care of the activities of what was going there, because she couldn't participate because she was too burnt. She had to wear, by the way, the same outfit that she got burnt in, because she couldn't have anything touching her legs. Mineral oil, doing all kinds of things to try to soothe it. But here's what happened. For my daughter, those girls who had come and said, you know what? She was still happy after all of that. Maybe it is genuine. Sometimes we make assumptions. Somebody's faking it. They're not real. Nobody responds like that. They're over dramatic. They're too friendly. They're too bossy. Nobody's really like that. Well, maybe we just don't understand the temperament. We all have different strengths and weaknesses, as we've talked about. The temperaments tell us our personality can impact our vocation and hobbies. If you look at the center of the sheets I gave you last time, I'm just going to pull this in so we can refer to it. You'll notice that this is for the now partiers, actors, salesmen, and speakers. If you think about their temperament, you could see how easy it would be for them to fit into those characteristics. If you're looking for Paul as a producer, a builder, a leader, often the person in charge of a company, an entrepreneur in that way. If you look at the Menders, they're diplomats, they're accountants, teachers, technicians, and the creators, artists, musicians, philosophers, professors, accountants, things that have a lot of detail and expression to them. Those are some of the, I would say, often stereotypical roles for each of those temperaments. That doesn't mean that only those temperaments can do those things. It means those might be natural for them. Though you have a melancholy accountant, he's doing everything perfectly, it actually seems to be a joy for him to crunch numbers. How many of you like working with numbers? I would have been disappointed in a couple of you if you didn't like numbers. It would have bothered me. But the picture is, some of us really like that. Not me. That's not my favorite thing. As a sanguine, there's nothing more drudgery than being locked by, unless there's a group of us that could do the numbers together, right? We could all talk about the numbers and how they work and how they fit. Then maybe I could handle that. So we recognize that maybe not everybody's going to be happy in the same kind of a position. As we talk about those different positions, we can actually take, though, and say, sometimes it's not a matter of what position, it's the matter of how the position is held. So let's just say pianist. Let's say the family is very keen on music, and so they're trying to work on every single member of their family playing piano. The melancholy is going to own that. And the music flows from their heart, and you can just feel it, and it goes through, and it seems like however they put it together, it's just artistic. The choleric can make it happen. I had a choleric pianist who was with us who had learned to play flawlessly. That is, every single note was there. But there was something missing. And she said, I learned to play because I was in a little church where nobody knew how to play. So I told myself I'm going to teach myself to play. And I did. She said, I don't feel the music at all. I just play the music. But she had the music and you could function with it. It just wasn't the same. The sanguine can play the tune maybe and make it work out, and sometimes that works, but usually they're not disciplined enough to make that flow and make it work. And oftentimes they play by ear and not by note because it's just easier for them to feel it rather than be disciplined and learn it. Because it's there and you can hear it. For me, when I took accordion lessons, and I took accordion lessons in this way. I went to my teacher and he would play the piece and then I would play the piece the next week. So what happened is I learned to listen to how he played the piece, and then that's what I went home and did. I practiced how I heard him play the piece. And I did that multiple times. And then he gave me an assignment, and then he got called away and didn't have a chance to play the piece. And I came back for my lesson the next week, and he said, okay, well, play for me. I said, could you play it first? And he said, why? I said, I just want to hear your interpretation of the song. He said, I'd really be interested in your interpretation of the song. And I said, you know what? I have no idea how this song could sound. I can't read those notes that are there. And that's when we decided that maybe I needed to be in a different class. And looking at that whole process, phlegmatic, it's okay. They can learn to play, and they'll play as needed. Often not their passion. Often it's good, and they'll be happy to be a part of the group if that's a benefit. Looking at the groups, though, you can say sometimes, again, it's not the actual function. It's how they take that function, and because of their temperament, how they fill in that function. If you've gone through a group of pastors, you're going to find that there are pastors in each of these temperaments. There are sanguine pastors who are just fun to be with. They're the people persons who talk to everybody and everybody knows them and they know their name and they're friends and they're great storytellers, and you look at them and that's the sanguine pastor. You look at another pastor and that pastor may be choleric, and they're able to organize, they're able to put together the church, they have a vision for the church and a direction for the church, they're moving forward with the church, they have administrative functions and they're all happening and they have that all together. A choleric pastor takes it on as an administrative task, and often choleric pastors move to larger churches because they're able to organize the process. The melancholy pastor, probably the deepest theologically. They come and they have a depth of knowledge and they pull that knowledge up and are able to share it. You learn new things from them. You can often, if you're sitting in a congregation with a melancholy pastor, check off and say, you know, almost every week I learned something new, something I didn't know, even though I've been in the church all this time, because there's something that they bring out that's a new expression to me, a new way of looking at it. And a phlegmatic pastor, they're the best at bringing churches together. I had a senior pastor who was called to the church that I was in after there had been a huge mess up. I was an associate pastor, and the previous pastor went out, went out under questionable conditions. He'd actually started taking on work as in another field while he was pastoring, and pretty soon he wasn't doing too much pastoring. So they went ahead and honored his desire and let him be not a pastor someplace else. And they brought in somebody who was the most tranquil, kind, gentle, putting oil on troubled waters pastor I've ever met. Gunnar was there, and he was just this kind, gentle man who everybody could just relate to, and he just calmed the church down and brought the people together. He counseled and he dealt with conflict and just did it in a masterful way of bringing people together and bringing peace. And at times, Every church probably needs a pastor in one of those characteristics who has that as an emphasis to pull things together. So when you look at that, you can say, but don't expect the phlegmatic pastor to be the choleric pastor, and vice versa. Looking at influence on who we become, those people and their sharing changes us. The temperaments tell us, they help us to celebrate the positives of your children's temperaments. If we want to look about this, usually when Shelley and I have presented the temperaments, one of the questions is, how does it relate to our children or our spouses? How do we work with this? Now, the concepts that I'm going to be sharing are specifically how we use it with kids, but most of the points that we make will also be applicable to how to deal with your spouse in the same kind of general concept. So when you're looking at how I relate to my kids and what does it do for me, I look and I say, first, I explore a variety of interests. Because oftentimes when they're growing and developing, they don't know what their temperament is. And they're exploring what that means. And to affirm them in the things that they're doing. And watch for the things that they're passionate about. Watch for the things that spark their interest. Acknowledging the value of the things they do, whether it's a piece of art. I think I've shared with you, I started with art as a kid, and I can tell you the very first picture that I painted that made any impact on me was one that I actually painted. My mom's name was Rose, and I painted a rose for my mom and gave it to her. My dad took it, looked at it, and put it up over his chair. And it stayed there till the day he died. And it was the very first thing that I could remember that my dad said, this is perfect. Now, it really wasn't perfect, but somehow he saw it that way. And for me, it sparked a desire to explore that field. It's like, wow, there's something that my dad really liked in this way, and I want to do more of that. Amazing how we can shape our children's movement just by encouragement. Realizing their temperaments is also recognizing that your temperament and their temperament may not be the same. My youngest daughter had two girls that she cared for over a several-year time, and in doing that, my daughter's first temperament is melancholy, and second temperament is phlegmatic. And she kind of likes to keep life to herself. Her daughter, sanguine. Bubbly, happy. And she said, it's just like I have to say, you know, there are times when we have to figure out ways to let her socialize. Because I don't want to socialize. So I have to figure out ways to let her socialize. Because my level of comfort in socializing is much less than what she needs or desires. Sometimes we have to look past us to say, what are their needs? Consequently, my daughter grew up in a group of sanguines, and it was not until after she left home that she realized she really wasn't sanguine, or at least not that sanguine, because we all had people around all the time, and she was just used to that, and so she learned how to cope as a sanguine. We're looking at how we deal with our children's temperament and encouraging them in the areas of their strengths. Now, that can be specific things, but anything from teaching them what you know to bringing them to a community that has that kind of emphasis, that all gives the opportunity for them to recognize that you're affirming who they are. It could be just the investment of time. Maybe you don't have the same understanding or background, and they like science. Well, taking them to a science fair or going with them to a musical event if you're not musical, by investing that time, you're telling them that you think they're valuable, that that's important to them. And investing in them in lots of different ways. That could be giving them lessons. That could be, if they're into a sport, to help finance that, like a mountain bike. If they're into chemistry, buying them set. If they're coding programs for the kids, if that's their interest, going out bird watching. I look at all those things and say, whatever you can do to encourage their interest and passion. Again, it doesn't just apply to kids. I'll share two things. my wife is an awesome interior decorator, and she wanted to move from nursing to interior decorating. And so, realizing that was her passion, and realizing we still needed money, realizing that was her passion, what we did is we decided to invest by giving her a course in interior decorating and making that to say, that's valuable. You're valuable to me. Guess what? My son picked that up, and his wife started the business. It's called Gimstinct, and it's a brand name of their little dog, Gimli, and they have a whole workshop based on that. And he invested in her business classes to help her business take off. That's the concept, to say, if it's important to you, I want to invest in you. And I love how our homeschoolers do that by bringing the homeschoolers together and helping them look at the connections that happen there and how that works for them. Peer counseling was one of the elements that I found super valuable for my daughter. She's very good at connecting with people, my oldest daughter, and we put her in a program for peer counseling to learn how to counsel others. She said it's the most beneficial educational thing that she did from the time that she left elementary school till she finished college, was that opportunity for her to be tutored in how to counsel others as peers. And their counseling program was excellent. So it's not just investing in things, it's investing in who they are. Now, maybe that means that you could do it at an early age and say, my little sanguine daughter loves telling stories. So for our devotional this week, I'm going to have her tell the story. That concept of investing in people. But part of that could also be cueing them in on their weaknesses to help them recognize what would be a natural weakness for them. So in doing that, you might share with the choleric what we call instant replay. When they do something that comes across brash or rude or not thoughtful, we just hold up a hand and say, could you replay that again? Which is a cue to say, it didn't come across on this side like we hope you thought you meant it. So let's do an instant replay. Maybe put in a few pleases or this is what I would like rather than do this, sort of a comment. So just by doing, son, it's easier, daughter, it's easy for it to come across what you say a little harsh. So what we're going to do is in those cases, we're going to give you an opportunity to do instant replay, to come back and replay that in a different way, saying it in a different standpoint. It could be that you could tell your little sanguine that, you know what, you enjoy talking a lot and there's lots of abilities there, but maybe you could also listen occasionally. So what happens is after we've done a while, let's say, give me 5. That's your eyes are watching, your ears are listening, your mouth is closed, your body's upright, and your hands are still, and you're not giving out, you're taking in. So, honey, with this group here, when we just go like this, that means you've probably told your 5th story, and we're probably ready for a little bit of give me 5. Maybe if your child or spouse or someone else that you're connecting with is always critical, you could review with your child the movie for dealing with the Glad game. How many of you remember that? Yeah, a few of you, thank you. The Glad game, going through and talking about counting the things that you're glad for, because sometimes it's so easy to list all the things that are critical. Have you ever tried to go through an entire day without saying anything critical? How did it go for you? It's an amazing thing when we start saying how much of what we say is critical. Giving somebody who's naturally critical an opportunity to review for themselves, to say, there are good things that are here as well. Take an opportunity and count those. Or maybe you can do it by saying to your phlegmatic, maybe before you go through and lay on your bed, maybe you could make a to-do list and check a couple things off. What else shapes personality? We've been talking a lot about personality or temperament, but a second thing is the birth order. A third is parental influence. A fourth is family environment, our values and morals. the school environment, our church connection, social media, and our age all plays into that. I'll just pick on age for a second. For example, in the U.S., neuroticism and extroversion decline across the lifespan. Agreeableness increases. So you just have to wait till those cholerics get old enough to be able to tolerate. Birth order is really a significant thing, and it's not the only thing, but it does affect the temperament. Firstborns have certain tendencies, and it's because of what happens in the order in how they interact with their family. Firstborns, often there are great expectations of the firstborns. How many of you are firstborns? Oh, good. Firstborns are those who have all the expectations of their parents resting on them, who have all the attention of their parents when they're there, because the parents are waiting for you watch the pictures. This is the first breath. This is the first eating. This is the first diaper change. The pictures just mount up because everything's an incredible event. So the firstborns grow up with a sense of responsibility to meet the needs that are there and the expectations of their parents. They're motivated to perform because that's part of what's been encouraged in their life. They're conscientious. They can be controlling. They're reliable because there is an expectation for them. They're often perfectionists, achievers, leaders. They can be bossy and self-assured. Those are general roles of the firstborn. The middleborns, now middleborns aren't just the second child. That can be second, third, fourth, and fifth. As there's a baby cub that's coming a little later, any of those can be considered the middleborns. The middleborns are often peacemakers, and you can understand what takes place because big brother or big sister has been by themselves all this time, and they've learned what's theirs is theirs. So in order to get along and to work things out, they're in this role of peacemaking. And if there's a little brother or sister that comes along, they have to span the gap between them. They're often social, adaptive, people pleasers. They feel excluded. They're funny. They're independent. They're the go-between. They're agreeable. They're nurturing, and sometimes rebellious because they feel like that's the way that they're going to get attention. The lastborns, and my wife Shelley said, well, first, how many of you are lastborns? Okay. Shelley spoke up for you. My wife Shelley said, honey, when you do this, do it with tact. Because sometimes when you say baby cub, you present it as if there's expectations. See, my little brother, baby cub syndrome. My little brother, he didn't have the same mom and dad as I did. I mean, they were biologically the same, but they weren't the same. There was this huge lack of discipline. There was this, whatever he wanted, he got. There was this picture of how things filled in. He was their cherished one. He was coming behind, and they knew he was going to be the last one they could put all their doting on. Oh, am I speaking like a little bit old? Okay. They can be social, funny, nurturing, a little rebellious as well, uncomplicated, charming, amazingly charming and fun, a little bit self-centered, manipulative, and they like attention. If you like, you can watch how they function. I'm not going to ask how many of you relate to those pictures. I'm just going to keep going. The only child often has characteristics of the firstborn and the lastborn because they basically are. Right? So they're responsible and confident and leaders. They're mature, they're conscientious, they're perfectionists. They seek attention and they seek approval. And they're often way beyond their years in maturity because they are often dealing directly with parents and adults all the time. They are incorporated earlier in the adult world and made to be a part of that function, so they often function in those roles. So, do temperaments or birth order predestine us as to who we're going to be? If we have these things, and we've talked about the significance of of our temperament, and we've talked about the significance of birth order. Am I predestined in life by these things? How do they impact me? It didn't define me, but it certainly helped me to understand myself. And as I grow, or try to grow, in virtue and in prayer and in union with the Father who made me that way, it is still a valuable tool for identifying predominant faults, much needed virtues, and strengths to build upon. It doesn't give us the determination of who we are, but it helps us to understand how do we relate to who we are. In 1 Peter 4, 1 and 2, it says, "Therefore, since Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same mind, for he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of the time in the flesh for the lusts of men, but for the will of God." If you didn't catch it, it's saying that we shouldn't go on just living with our weaknesses. We have the ability to be transformed by God's power. And although we see all these strengths and we need to build on those strengths, we recognize that there are weaknesses to be corrected. The Ministry of Healing says it this way: God has given us the power of choice. It is ours to exercise. We cannot change our hearts. We cannot control our thoughts, our impulses, our affections. We cannot make ourselves pure, fit for God's service. But we can choose to serve God. We can give Him our will. Then He will work in us to will and to do according to His good pleasure. Thus, our whole nature will be brought under the control of Christ. The picture is, it doesn't matter whether we were born with this or it's part of the nurture that we have. And you have people always arguing, is it nature or nurture? Did it come from how I was born or how I was brought up? Those who put their trust in God are not to be enslaved by any hereditary or cultivated habit or tendency. Not heredity, that's temperament, or cultivated habit or tendency. That's how we were treated as kids. Instead of being held in bondage to the lower nature, there to rule every appetite and passion, God has not left us to battle against evil with only finite strength. Whatever may be our inherited or cultivated tendencies to wrong, we can overcome them through the power that He is ready to impart. The picture there is then of that work and that process. God has strategically designed each one of us where we are and who we are so that we could be effective. And maybe it is we are where we're at for such a time as this. He's made us who we are to minister to the world. Just a reminder of the things that are coming up. We have the horizontal gospel tomorrow night. 5 ways to love like Jesus. Loving porcupine people. Give them a parade of honeybees and buzzards. We're looking at the conflict management golden rule. You don't want to miss that one. If there's one of the topics that you want to grasp, it's the golden rule of conflict resolution. It will give you a tool to use for the rest of your life. Forgive as I've been forgiven. Intentionally deeper, how to build our communication style. Restoring and boundaries, good neighbor fences. Those are the topics that are ahead. Before we have our texts and our drawing for tonight, I just want to open up to comments. How did you do with what we talked about tonight, and how does it fit for you? What are you thinking? Give me some feedback. There have got to be some sanguines that can talk. Yeah, please.
I was fascinated by the first, second, third born. I'm the baby.
Okay.
I was what Kevin always called me, the alpha sib. I was in charge of the parents. I
Okay.
was kind of in charge of my brothers. So my my first, second, third role, I'm doing his.
You're picking all of them up, huh? Wow, that's amazing. And I'll mention too in those thank you. If you'd like to take that around. When we're looking at the birth order, if there are gaps in the birth order, it can make a huge difference. If there's 5 years between the first child and the next child, the second child often takes on the role of a firstborn. If there's 5 years span between them. Because they're in the role in that way and they're treated that way by the parents, so often pick up that role. The little baby cub almost always stays in their role. Okay, who else has another question? Thank you. Please, Richard.
I was wondering, we all have role models. Don't want to talk about people like Enoch. You know, we can live like Enoch, and so on. I know in some cases, pretty clear, like Elijah was obviously a go-getter, whereas Elisha was more slow and teaching and so on. I think you hit it on the mark when you said that it doesn't matter which type you were, we can adapt and have the sanctified life and so on. Is that pretty much what you're
Yes, if I were to say it this way, all of the strengths that you've been given in your temperament, God has placed with you to use for His glory and to build others up. And the weaknesses are the opportunities for you to connect with God and have Him transform that part of your character so that you can get all the benefits without having any of the weaknesses demonstrated. That's the goal. Not to be somebody you're not, but just to have the non-sin affected personality as it was meant to be.
Okay, so being the analytical person that
Yes,
I am.
my melancholy, please speak up.
You use the word all. So my question is, in each of the boxes there are numerous descriptors, positive and negative.
Correct.
Are you all of those things if you're in that box?
Good question. Those are tendencies. Those are the pure form of the temperament. And if you caught what we were talking about, I think it was last night or maybe this morning, last night I think, as you put the two temperaments together, or your major two temperaments, when they put together, it's a blend. Somebody who's choleric and has, let's say, a 70% choleric rating on there, but they have a 60% phlegmatic. The weaknesses of the choleric are not going to show up near the same, because the phlegmatics are balancing them in the opposite. Their strengths are not the same as the other, so they'll have a much more balanced demonstration of those. They'll also have a lesser ability of the gifts in that area. They won't have the same demonstration of those. In fact, if you're working with Myers-Briggs temperament analysis or Carl Jung's or any of those that look at 16 or 32 PF, then what you'll realize is that the two temperaments put together basically will form those 16 PF and give you within those ranges how they fit. I showed just for a moment last night one of those slides that has the rings, and it shows how the rings intersect, and then it has with them labeled the titles for the NFJ or whatever your temperament is in the Myers-Briggs. That's just a little more detailed. So basically, as you put those temperaments together, you'll come up with the balance in that line. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're going to have all of them. Some just may be more dominant or not as dominant as the others.
Correct. And if you look at, I use John as an example for the phlegmatic this morning, but actually that's John after Jesus has touched him. Before that, he was called the Son of Thunder. But afterward, you find him laying on Jesus' chest. You find him the intimate and close to him. You find him discussing love. In fact, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John are all dipped as it is. He wrote with his pen dipped in love because he had that experience with God that transformed him.
I had a question
please.
too, actually. When you were presenting at the beginning of your presentation tonight, the temperaments and maybe how they function in the church. You have different people getting comfortable up front, and it seems oftentimes we tend to elevate those who are in more visible positions. So you might have a sanguine who is very, very comfortable up front and maybe even preaching a sermon, and we laud them. How can we be better as a church at recognizing people's different temperaments and where their skills are? They may be terrified to go up front, but maybe they're excellent somewhere else. Like, how can we be better as a community to recognize those different strengths that might not be as visible.
I appreciate that. When we talked about, we'll be talking about 3 nights from now, I think it is, parading. And the parading concept is what we're going to be talking about, how to encourage, how to look at ways to affirm people in what they're doing. Being a helps, that's a spiritual gift. Somebody who has the gift of helps. You know, there are people who will just say, hey, what do you need? Do you need me to set up tables? Do you need me to come and pick up the things afterwards? Do you need me to open and close for you? However it is, they have the gift of helps. They're just willing to be a part, and they don't want recognition. They're just doing it out of service, and that's where they feel most comfortable. But often, they aren't shown the appreciation for that incredible gift of time and willingness, and we need to applaud them. If you'd like, we have the point of appreciation that we put in the bulletin, and we also put in the latest. We're happy to have you share points of appreciation, and wouldn't it be awesome if we started picking that up as a congregation and writing a little note to somebody and saying, you know, I notice you doing this in the church. I really appreciate that. I notice you greet people without ever being an official greeter, and you care about them, or you have them sit with you. I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. I notice you do the flowers outside, and the yard looks really nice. I just want to mention that I know that takes time, and that's really valuable. It helps our community. Any of those kinds of things, sharing that. We'll talk about more ways of parading as well, but that's a great question. Who else has a question or comment? Back here, please.
I think we're recording too, so this is helpful.
I just wondered, would you be discussing masks?
Masks? Mm-hmm. Not really too much in what we're doing. We're not talking pretenders or those who put on a false front. We won't be doing that in this series.
Okay. If it's not a false front, if it is just how you coped with what life threw at you when you were young.
Yes, and when you say false front, the term that Greek uses is hypokratos, which means putting on a mask. We translate it hypocrite. That's putting on that mask, and that just means you're hiding behind a front. That doesn't mean that you're negative in heart. It just means that this is what you display, and it's not necessarily what's going on here. So I was using it from that standpoint.
I mean,
okay.
I'm sanguine, okay?
Yes.
As a child.
I knew that already.
I put on a double phlegmatic mask to cope.
Are you talking about coping mechanisms?
Yeah. And I didn't know until years later who I really was.
And that's a good point. Oftentimes our circumstances can affect our expression. I think I mentioned my daughter in a group of sanguines, and she functioned in a sanguine way, although it wasn't her comfort zone. And once she was out of a group of sanguines, she started dropping off some of the things that were part of just us and realized her own identity and said, you know what? I really don't like to do those things. I never really did like to do those things. They were just part of our family, and I love our family, so I did those things. And so in that sense, it's sort of a little bit of what you're saying. In order to be a part of the group or with the circumstances that were there, she dealt with it in a certain way. Work can also change how you function. Somebody having requirements for you and putting things out may put you in a different way. If you're being mistreated at work, it can cause you to withdraw, can cause all kinds of changes in your temperament and reaction. So there are, of course, things that generally affect these areas. Please.
I just wanted to ask a question. I was thinking about children in the Bible. Wasn't Joseph the last, and the mother and father were getting tired by the time he was born, and he was the last born? No, seriously.
Okay.
I think it even says something to that effect about him in the Bible. There's somewhere in that one of the children, it says the mother was getting tired. Yeah.
Joseph, yeah. In looking at Joseph's situation, he was the firstborn of a specific mother.
What?
Yeah.
Follow it up. Okay.
He was the firstborn of what?
Of one mother, right? There was
Rachel.
4 mothers.
Oh, okay.
12 brothers, 4 mothers, but he was the firstborn.
The favored because of that connection, the favored because of the joy of that relationship, and played in the role of the firstborn, and his dad put him in the role of the firstborn in front of all the rest of the children. That was part of the whole scenario of conflict there.
I got to reread that.
That's okay. Other comments? Right here.
Does it matter also whether the firstborn or lastborn is a male or female?
Yes, and there can be firstborn males and firstborn females within the same family, especially if they're separated by other children, where the firstborn takes on the female, for example, if she was the second firstborn female in the family, she takes on the role of the firstborn all her own because of the favoritism and the connection of how the parents treat her.
Right, so as a female being the youngest, the fact that I was female put me on a different level.
Correct.
Because I had to do all the things that females were supposed to do, and my brothers didn't.
Yes.
Impact for adoption.
For adoption. Yes, if we're talking about in birth order, adoption often takes on the role of a firstborn because they're basically chosen in that position. Even if they're with other children, the way that they're treated is a decision for that person to be a central part, and that's often taken in that way, and that's often how they follow in line with how they're treated in birth order. Honestly, yes, that can be a part of the process of the natural children resenting the adopted because they've been placed in the role of firstborn and taken additional attention, favor, oftentimes considered to be treated with special care and regard in line with that causes the rest of the children to have resentment in that direction. Other questions before we close? Okay, right here.
I'm just curious how the different personalities relate to husband and wife interactions. We all hear that opposites attract, but then going through everything, it kind of seems like opposites would be bad for a marriage. What do you think about that?
Good question. Opposites attract or opposites good in a relationship? There are differences. I find that the majority of weddings that I've performed, there are significant opposites in them, in how they, and often it's because we are attracted to the characteristics that we don't have. There's some benefits in that. So I would say the majority, that's the process. But that doesn't mean that's exclusive, and I've seen some incredible marriages. I mentioned two cholerics being together, and sometimes they can be power couples. When they have their own areas of design, they can be shakers and movers and supportive of each other. You can often find that in political arenas, where the husband and wife are both politicians and working on that role and filling that position because they have their defined areas of their expectation and working forward. If they don't, there'll probably be collision, and they probably won't be married very long. If they don't define their roles and positions. Okay? Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We want to have Jonathan read just through some Bible marking text for us before we have our drawing.
So just as we did last night, I want to bring up the Bible verse for this week, which is, "By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." And what we learned today is that God knows our upbringings and ways and that comes on Psalms 87:6. The Lord will record when He registers the peoples. This one was born there. And then in James 1:14, we each have our own area of weakness, but each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. And then also in Jeremiah 1:5, we remember that God created us. Before I formed you, in the womb I knew you, and before you were born. And 1 Peter 4:10 and 11, God created us to serve. If anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. And last, in Philippians 2:3 and 4, we remember to put on Christ, in Christ. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others.
Awesome. So are you going to draw something for us, Jonathan? I'll stir them up and you draw, okay? Damon. Let's give Damon a hand. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. God bless.